Hello everyone, we're from Group 3 and my name is Yue. So today we're going to talk about Chapter 12, which is Producing and Consuming Heritage Tourism for the Recent Trends. It was written by Dallin J. Timothy. So I'm going to be briefly introducing some basic concept about what is heritage tourism and how the social media and technology affects the heritage tourism. So the introductions are very basic. Heritage is what humankind inherits from the past and utilized in the present, cherished by the society for its educative, scientific, economic, political, and identity value, which is basically what we're doing now. We are cherishing and trying to pass on what happened in the past, in the history, to our future generation. So according to National Trust for Historic Preservation in 2008, traveling to experience to the place, artifacts, and activities that actually represent the story and people of the past and presented. It includes cultural, historical, and nature resources. According to the paper that we've been reading, heritage tourism, which is some estimates suggest comprise between 50% to 80% of all the travels takes many forms, which is a very big percentage when it comes to travel. Lots of people actually they would love to travel to a cultural destination. This is one of the heritage tourism destination that I want to talk about, which is in Peru. It's called Machu Picchu. It lies in one of the most stunning setting of any archaeological site in the world, and this ancient city of Incas Quesaquedas down steep wall on each side of the mountain were terraced steps that disappear over cliff's edge into the valley below, which is a very famous, one of the very famous heritage tourism destination in Peru. The other example that I want to give you is, of course, Egypt, the pyramids of Giza. It is a surreal sight raising from the barren desert landscape. It's standing guard nearby and almost as impressive as the cynics gazing blankly out over the land. It's, I would say, one of the most famous tourism destination in the world, and this is definitely the place that I want to go travel as well. Secondly, I want to talk about social media and technology, how it affects the tourism trends and issues. So there are two types of heritage tourism. One is tangible and one is intangible. The first one is that tangible, which means for example, the military attractions such as DMZs in Korea, I would say, and the literary heritage, dark attractions, historical buildings, archaeological sites, industrial relics, religious attractions, and there are lots of more examples that I could give you, but I'm pretty sure everybody heard a little bit of here and there. And the second type is intangible, for example, some things that you can't touch, such as arts, language, gastronomy, sports, physical, and religion. There are also two types of heritage tourists. The first kind is the serious kind, and then the casual kind. So there are the serious kind. For example, there are a lot of fans, a lot of people who love literature or history. They will love to go on an adventure and history adventure to the Mediterranean areas, such as Greece, Malta, Cyprus, some countries like that, and a lot of like for train, they love to visit all the railways in the museum in the world, and such as small sports fans that they want to visit all the stadium. Let's say basketball fans, they want to visit all the famous basketball stadium in America. And there are also the casual kind of tourists, such as taking a portside tour of a tea plantation and taking selfies at a famous sightseeing spot. They're less intense, I would say. Their trips are much less intense, and they would do something more relaxing, and they will have a good time with it. So now let's talk about what does social media and technology do in heritage tourism. So first of all, social media based user generated knowledge are playing a very important role in travel decision making, according to Hudson and Tice in 2013 research. So social media platforms, they can actually shape people's decision making process. So for example, if I see a advertisement on Facebook and they're telling me going to France, the tickets is on sale now, and I'll probably think about going to France if I tend to go there. And it's a much less expensive but much wider consumer audience. It increased the destination competitiveness. Using the internet or GPS-based technology, you can easily to target who is your consumer and how to target on them. Of course, the smart destination plays a very important role in these social media and technology field as well, because people tend to be more and more lazy. They enjoy things are more convenient. If you have a smart destination, it would definitely attract a lot of tourists. And then I want to talk about the utility of social media. First of all is the communication. The real-time, low-cost, and personalized communication with a large audience is coming in play, because every company wants an easier way to target their consumers. They want something cheaper. They want something efficient. And I think social media is the best way for a lot of them. The marketing strategy is getting more and more easier for the company as well. Promoting and branding a heritage site online is definitely much more easier than you do it in any other platforms. The shared information is also a crazy thing about internet and social media, because of you can see all the crowded source and innovative ideas from the audience, and they can to better the existing service. And then the last one that I want to talk about is the speed. The utility of social media, it has a lot of advantage. They can receive and respond to the customers in seconds, which is you can't do in phones or emails or textings. This is one of the greatest invention in the history, I would say, and definitely a good advantage for both sides, the consumers and the company.
So now I will talk about non-traditional heritage tourism. There are many different types of tourism that are not really perceived to be connected to heritage, but actually do suggest traditions that are inherited from the past. Some examples are pilgrimage, agritourism, sports tourism, dog tourism, volunteer tourism, food tourism, and visiting friends and relatives. Today I will focus a little bit on the dog volunteer tourism, also agricultural tourism and sports tourism, and in the end you will see why these types are still considered heritage tourism. Dag tourism, also called black tourism, morbid tourism, or grief tourism, refers to visiting places like cemeteries, concentration camps from World War II, battlefields, prisons, crime scenes, dungeons, sites of nuclear catastrophes, haunted places, and many more. Visitors visit those places where people suffered, died, and natural disasters happened, to either learn about the history or just to get to experience the scary atmosphere to get an adrenaline kick. Despite of that, these places hold a lot of heritage and are very important in the human history. Some of the attractions are man-made to attract tourists, and others are original and natural. However, all of them shape the tourist experiences. For example, there's a concentration camp called Mauthausen in my home country Austria, which is famous, and visitors from all over the world come to visit this place, where many horrible things happened. When you go there, you get shivers and get taken back in time. A few other examples would be the Czech the Ripper dungeon in London, Chernobyl in Ukraine, the sites of the Jeju uprising in South Korea, and in Colombia, places associated with Pablo Escobar, the drug lord from the Medellin clan. On the picture on the bottom right, you can even see a tourist taking a photo with his gravestone. However, drug tourism is heavily criticized for the exploitation of the deceased, the contribution of building a macabre funhouse atmosphere, and desecration of the place in question. So, how is drug tourism related to heritage? People visit the places to learn about their human history and receive a deaf education. Seaton, for instance, proposed drug tourism as a desire to experience a kind of death as a motivating factor, while later research by Stone theorizes the consequences of visiting some drug tourism sites as a means by which individuals might contemplate their own life and mortality through the tourist gaze on death. So it can be said that these places hold a lot of heritage and are therefore categorized as non-traditional heritage tourism. Secondly, I will talk about volunteer tourism, which refers to people traveling around the world to do positive things for humankind or the environment. Most people do that at their own expense and for altruistic reasons. Some of the things volunteers do are building houses, collecting plastic, teaching underprivileged communities, planting trees, taking care of animals, and so many more. It can also be connected to heritage, as many volunteers help out in museums or dig in archaeological sites to find ancient pieces, which can be connected to our being and our history. The benefits the volunteers get from these experiences are usually self-fulfillment. They develop their skills, for example, construction skills, their socialization, pursuing their hobby, or to use their spare time. And last but not least, they have something to put on their resume, which looks good in their future applications. Many organizations, such as national parks, museums, archives, historic centers, and so on, depend on volunteers, as their budget is not high enough to pay that many workers. Furthermore, sometimes they have tight deadlines that can only be met with many people and many helping hands. Therefore, many tourists spend their holidays traveling to those places. However, now due to COVID-19, many of those projects and historical sites are lacking in volunteers, as most people cannot travel, which is a huge issue in this industry. Some even have to take measures to survive. In April this year, for example, volunteer tourism was down by 98%, and it will be a hard way back, as due to the pandemic, countries will also cut the budget for NGOs, and the volunteers' fundings are also missing. It is said that schools and daycare centers will generally survive, but conservation projects may not. There's also agricultural tourism, which refers to people traveling to farms and to stay there or even help with the production of homemade meals and farm products. But how does this relate to heritage? Tourism farms are preserving tangible heritage, mostly historic buildings such as barns and mills, and antique equipment such as tractors and tools. People preserve it either for personal or family meaning, or for the desire to preserve the country's rural heritage. Farms also offer a variety of agricultural activities for visitors to educate them and to preserve the heritage of farms. For example, they offer leisure tours, recreational self-harvest activities, and observation and participation of agricultural practices. They mostly also offer hospitality services, food services, and hosting services, like weddings, which you can see here on the picture. The last type of non-traditional heritage tourism I want to talk about is sports tourism. It can be referred to people attending sports events and visiting stadia. It can also be referred to as traveling for the purpose of participating in a sport, leisure, or recreational activity, or as passive sports tourism, which is traveling for the purpose of visiting a sports, leisure, or recreational activity. However, when we talk about sports tourism, we usually mean the latter. Furthermore, sports tourism is a rapidly growing sector of the global travel. Heritage is connected to sports tourism as fans identify with the past of their team, even though the past does not exist in their living memory. Sport reflects both heritage that occurred on the field of play, while also articulating the achievements of athletes, teams, and events that go beyond sports and become part of a grander narrative. There are four categories of sport heritage. First of all, tangible immovables, which refers to spaces with relevance to the sporting past. For example, stadia that have hosted famous events such as the Colosseum in Rome, where gladiator games took place, or the Olympic Stadium in Seoul. The second category is tangible movable sport heritage, that refers to objects, articles, and tangible experiences that don't necessarily have to be rooted. For example, sport museums and halls of fame where artifacts are displayed. They can easily be moved to a different location. Examples would be balls, gloves, medals, trophies, etc. The third category is intangibles, that refers to rituals, traditions, chants, memories, or nostalgia. Examples would be the chants of the football clubs Chelsea and Manchester United, which are sung by fans and make the sports history feel present in every single game. And even if they would change the location of the stadium, the chants would still be living on. The last category is goods and services, which refers to especially retro apparel. For example, it is very popular to sell throwback jerseys from previous eras, especially when there are anniversaries of sports achievements. It makes people live in nostalgia of different generations and keeps the sports history alive. Examples would be jerseys from the Football World Cup when the DDR, also called West Germany, won in 1974. So, as you saw, also non-traditional heritage tourism is related to heritage and preserves the history of our ancestors. Now Kyung will talk about the issues of scale.
Hi, I'm Kim Taeyang. Finally, I will present the issue about the scale of the heritage. There are three different types of heritage scale. The smallest is the personal heritage tourism, for example, visiting ancestral lands. And the medium is the local heritage tourism. And the largest is the World Heritage Tourism. I would like to talk about the most famous and controversial issue of World Heritage Tourism. UNESCO's World Heritage List is generally biased. Many countries view the World Heritage List as a marketable brand that will automatically increase visitation, but the reality is a little different. Because this is not necessarily the case, and that the World Heritage List brand does not always result in positive outcomes for host communities. I will explain one specific example of this through Yangdong Village, one of Korea's World Heritage Sites. Yangdong Village is a traditional village that contains Korean history. This was a clan village of Yangban during Joseon Dynasty. Yangban means noble or aristocrat, and the same noble family lived together in one village. Therefore, the aristocratic culture of the Joseon dynasty remains intact. It is located in the heartland of the Joseon dynasty and keeps the beautiful nature. It was designated as a World Heritage Site in 2010. When it was listed as a World Heritage Site, many tourists visited temporarily, but the number of tourists decreased. The reason is the conflict between tourists and local residents. Let's take a look at the tourist position. First, they want to see the unmodernized past. Tourists feel disappointed when they face modern facilities such as cars and electric poles in Yangdong Village. Second, they want to experience the real lives of local residents. Tourists are curious about what kind of life they are living, whether they really maintain the lifestyle of Joseon Dynasty, and they have a strong desire to experience it. Third, they do not want to study the knowledge related to the tradition that Yangdong Village has, because they often visit Yangdong Village for healing or relaxation. Then let's look at the locals' position. First of all, Yangdong Village is not a place decorated like a folk village, but a place where actual residents live. So even if Yangdong Village is designated as a world-class tourist destination, they don't want their privacy to be violated. In addition, even though Yangdong Village preserve tradition and nature, they need a minimal modern convenience because residents actually live there. Next, residents take great pride in their culture. They recognize that Yangdong village is a noble and superior culture because they are descendants of Yangban, and only Yangban families live in one village for a long time. Sometimes they recognize only traditions that reflect their own emotion and identity as true. They are very conservative. Third, they don't want publicity. Like other tourist attractions, they don't want to appear on TV shows because they don't want the problem of over-tourism in Yangdong Village. So I've organized this situation into a table like this. Local resident and tourist conflict. First, residents need minimal modern conveniences, but tourists don't want to see a modernized figure. Second, residents hope that tourists love and understand the tradition with the same mind as them, but tourists are not interested in traditional knowledge. Third, residents don't want to allow them to see their lives, but tourists want to see the actual life of residents. And while the residents are proud of their culture and have a strong desire to preserve it, tourists want to be provided with moral light entertainment and experience. From this case, we can see that getting to World Heritage List doesn't necessarily mean that the benefit is maximized. So let me tell you the conclusion. Three members of our team presented three factors that affect the heritage tourism in turn. We need to identify the potential of heritage through a comprehensive understanding of these factors. That way, we can create a successful heritage tourism. And this is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.